Okay. We're going to think through the magic of getting a course profile guide. Actually, if you have a cell phone and you want to just get my email, ask me for it and I'll get it to you. If it seems to apply to you at the end of the conference, email me, ask me. This is not proprietary information. Somebody that's really good at data and spreadsheets probably already has this as a Tableau somewhere, but I feel like for those of us that are learning data, I wish somebody had told me how to do this 2 years ago. I would have saved ASU a lot of money. I was like fumbling my way through this. Okay, so as I said, data and spreadsheets are not necessarily what we all want to show up to talk about in a conference. So my candy coating shell around spreadsheets is going to be the matrix. Okay, so we're going to make it sound like a super cool thing where we're like, this deep data. Oh, I should probably stand where there's a camera so our Zoom participants can see me, right, Brittany? Excellent. So I don't even have a camera on me. Joke's on you guys. I can walk around and do whatever I want. Okay, so in our matrix unplugged nature, what I want to acknowledge is that everybody has an idea about what is going on in the learner experience. And sometimes you're going to present data and it's going to conflict with their current mental model and they won't care what the data says. I just want to warn you, like that's just, we nod our heads because we're like, yes, yes. One of my favorite examples, I was telling a brilliant man in our department that cares deeply about students and likes me and respects me. And I said, hey, I think this specific ed tech tool is going to be really good for our learners. It's accessible, it's mobile friendly, it's cheap, it's very hard to chat GPT your way through it. It's a good thing. And he goes, I don't think it is. And I was like, based on what data? Well, I've been doing this for a long time. Okay, but based on what data did you decide that this ed tech tool isn't relevant? In fact, he had no data, qualitative or quantitative, to the opposite. But we still don't have that ed tech tool in all of our courses. Let me give you a little bit of context about who I am specifically. If you don't know, ASU is divided up into three kind of parts. We have AE, the academic enterprise, which is like ASU proper. Most of our students that were admissible, they applied to ASU, they met the college requirements, and they are entered. They pay their tuition on the front end. So my daughter's a freshman at ASU West right now, and she had to pay whatever normal people would have to pay minus the QTR, right? She has a qualified tuition reduction. So like she had to pay for all of her classes up front, no matter whether or not she passed. But in our arm, the learning enterprise, if you are deemed inadmissible, you get bounced into our open scale system. We have only digital classes. We have a few pilots with a classroom model, which means that our digital self-paced courses are offered with the wraparound supports of a brick and mortar high school classroom. So they are primary high school classrooms supporting our solution line, which is like an IB or an AP kind of situation, right? High schoolers doing college work. The caveat is, and the difference between AE and LE is that if you pass this class with a grade you like and you want it, you can transcribe that for only $400. And if you failed it or you got a B and you really need an A, it goes away. Enroll again, do it again. I teach statistics in this course, in this ULC model universal learner course. I will try really hard not to alphabet soup my way you into a boredom. In universal learner courses, I teach statistics, STP 226, elements of statistics, and you can imagine, I don't know how many, see, I didn't see anybody in here go, oh, like I usually get eye rolls. It's like when you say that I like statistics or I teach statistics, usually my primary response is, I hate that course. Oh, I like chose a different degree because it's had statistics in it. So I teach what I consider one of the high anxiety courses in a low academic risk environment. So if you don't get the grade that you want, you can take my class again for $25. So my daughter, ASU West freshman, pays thousands of dollars tuition before she gets in. She's got like, what, 2 days to decide whether or not she fits in the curriculum or with the instructor, whether this is the right class for her. But in our course, that's not how it is. So there's no academic risk, low barrier to entry in terms of finances. The only requirements are you have a laptop, access to broadband, stable broadband internet, and English, like proficiency. But we don't test you. Like, we don't give you a test for English. We just don't apologize that we can't offer our courses in Swahili. We just, like, this is what we have. So same thing with students. If they don't have access to internet, then we don't, it doesn't matter. I digress. Data, spreadsheets. Okay, so as it relates to spreadsheets, when we're trying to understand what, in my session over the summer, I had 336 stats students in my course. And I will have access to showing how to do this later, right? Okay. That would be wonderful. Go ahead and you can move that over now. Okay, so we're going to talk about how you pull out this code, because there's a lot of code that shows up. And for those of you that are happy people and you don't necessarily like when a spreadsheet shows up and there's lots of boxes with lots of text and numbers and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? We're going to start by, if you do not use Canvas, you can kind of tune out of this a little bit right here, but it's very important when you're going through to do an export. Actually, before you export, right here in this student name, you have to click on inactive and concluded students. Are there any Canvas? Like, I really need to know how to do this. Okay, I'm going to skip through this part because it's a moot point. But basically, when we are getting this Canvas data into a thing that I can see through, I'm going to close myself out. I can't quite. It's going to go down. I'm going to have student data, and I can't leave student data on this random computer. I can't show this. Sad day. Okay. When we're downloading this data, one of the things that we want to do for our course profile guide, I'm going to show this to you. Not that you'll be able to see it yet, but we're going to open it with a PC's touch. When we're downloading this Canvas data, we're going to look at all this code and we're going to try to figure out a way to make it meaningful. So specifically in terms of framing student data, what are the two main metrics that we're usually looking at? Two main metrics: Canvas data, grade report, pass and withdrawal. Yeah, for us, it's a ridiculous rate. If I have a like not drop rate, so a stay rate of like 20% in some of my STEM courses, I'm like, yes! Isn't that ridiculous? Engineering, but engineering's hard. Okay, so engineering's hard. We want to look at drop rate, pass rate. What else? In general, we want to look at engagement rate and we want to look at performance, right? So in general, I'm going to call these performance metrics, pass and course performance, or assignment performance. So the way that we're going to look through that is we're going to create a spreadsheet, and it's going to say, a really cool thing. And I feel bad that you guys don't get the full experience of this because it was really well laid out. Okay. So when we download this spreadsheet, we're going to create different, I keep wanting to look at my own computer and it's not going to help you guys here. Ooh, right here. So if you're writing something down or you're going to copy something, if this is the only thing that you need to know in terms of framing a spreadsheet, these are your column headers. You want an assignment title, an attempted, an engagement rate, a pass rate. This is a good picture point. Like if you're going to take a picture of this, this is like a highlight. When we're looking at these, we're going to create some pivot tables. How much pivot tables experience do we have here? Okay, so is it worth me going through, this is how you do a pivot table? Oh, I like that. That was yes, we do. Okay, I'm going to give you just going to give me 1 second. I'm going to have to actually download that sheet on this computer. Shoot. I feel like this is what was most challenging, was figuring out how to use this specific data. You do have Excel on this PC, right? We'll find out together. One of the things that's challenging with any kind of spreadsheet is being able to have the metrics by which we come back and look at it. So if we're going to ultimately create a graph, that's our ultimate goal here, creating a graph. We need to have reliable data, because inevitably somebody is going to say, but how do you know? How do you check the data? Confirm that for me. But it's not going to project my Excel spreadsheet. But I see it on this. Oh, I bet you I need to share a different screen, right? New share. Awesome. Okay. So we have the spreadsheet. We're going to download it. And one of the big things that when we're starting this new tab right here, we're going to look at engagement and, oh, Excel is different than. We're going to figure this out together, friends. This is what I get for not using my own laptop. Brittany, is it okay if I just switch laptops? Will it not push it all through? It's not going to load. I don't want to waste your time. Okay. I will send you this spreadsheet, but we're essentially going to look through our pivot tables, and we're going to go down by assignment type. So if you're looking through assignment types, or you're looking at course data, let's say that you're looking at it from a program level. The program level basically cares whether or not students are moving through what? Program. Which courses, right? If you're looking at course data, we're looking at whether or not they're moving through assignments. So if you're going to compare assignments from one session to another, let's say you make a change, how are you going to deal with that? So you had discussion boards in the fall, but this spring, you don't have discussion boards, but you still have a different statistics challenge. Let's say I've gamified my statistics course and I've now made it a quest. And we no longer have discussion board points. We have collaboration quests. And they offer the same pedagogy in terms of connect with your peers, but it now has a different point value. How are you going to compare the two? Because discussion board points are boring and they're only worth 5 points. But even though they essentially do the same thing next year, they're worth 15 because it's a side quest. Percentages. If you're comparing populations, we're always going to use percentages. I feel like if we were going to look through the majority of this spreadsheet, and I'm just going to give it to you so we can look through it later, but I want to be able to answer the questions that you might have, specifically in terms of maybe even dealing with data, not in just creating the spreadsheet, since I can't really show you how to do that well, but how do you navigate the people that you need to communicate the data to? And I think that we all have really good insight because we're probably data people together, offering insights to decision makers, teachers, program designers, application boards like admissions boards. People need to understand the data, and they're not going to read the spreadsheet necessarily. What are some of the things that you have come up against so that we can just make a collaborative understanding of? Because if you have experienced it, somebody else at another table is probably going to experience it. And it might not be about an ed tech. It might not be about, hey, I want $1,000 a course so that I can put this educational technology in my stats course so that more people pass it. You might be suggesting that this course is not well aligned with the program. And being able to communicate that data is really important. Talk to me about it. I see it. We're only at 11:15. And considering this whole spreadsheet thing is not just about the data, because there will be another technology next year. There will be AI. Somebody's going to be able to learn how to make the graphs for us. But actually making use of the data is going to be a bigger deal. No? Which are which, by the way? Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. And then how do you do statistical analysis, or do you just do like, here's a percentage, here's a bar graph, and you try to convince a decision maker that that's a big enough difference? And then what's the primary thing that you come up against that decision makers either don't understand or they disagree with you? I'm not glad that it's happening with you, but I'm glad I'm not alone. Okay, keep going. Mm, mhm, mhm. Do you ever feel like you are not doing enough data analysis to make your point? Right, because there's a deep dive. And now that we have quiz statistics in Canvas, you can look at how every question performs if it's a multiple choice question. And so how do you know? Because to your point, is the decision maker going to care? And if we're looking at metrics, one of the things that pivot tables can do is you can filter by passing. Did they pass? So if you have an assignment list, how many people attempted it by pivot table? You can also have one that says how many people passed, meaning they earned a score above 70. That's a filter. The class count, you can have an average, and it will tell you the average score of every assignment, and then you can make a graph out of that automatically. You can read it. I don't. Oh, I feel bad that technology is not helping me to do this, but this is really important in terms of understanding the pivot table, because when you're creating things on the fly, that's the only thing that the Tableau dashboards, even though the Tableau dashboards can be instantaneous and be there for you as soon as you need it, sometimes the decision maker is going to ask you, yeah, but what about? And then it's some drill down thing. So knowing how to use a pivot table is super important. And when you look through this course profile guide, you'll get a sense of that. I also want to offer to you, in addition to my condolences, right? Like, it stinks that we can't just say, look, the data says, therefore it's working. When you're looking through the data with your decision makers about the high enrollment courses, are they asking you when learners drop out of the course? Do they also ask you when they drop out, do they leave ASU? And how often does that happen? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is withdrawal and retention rate an issue for anybody else that's here? What are the other problems that you guys are coming up against so we can talk about a pivot table that will fix, that will support your opinion, that will support your experience? Everybody's quiet. You don't have to be quiet. When you're looking through this data, we're going to ask ourselves these things. When you see a graph and the pivot tables are suggesting this is how many students were engaged, whether it's an assignment or a course or a program, you want to ask yourself if there's any dips in engagement, meaning the bar on the left or the right is taller. So if you see a graph where module 1 and module 3 have higher engagements, or English 101 and whatever there's not usually an English 103, but pretend there is philosophically, like whatever it is in the program requirements. If there's higher engagement on the preceding and the following one, we need to ask ourselves why. If you compare not by course flow, not by assignment date, but by assignment type. So I have discussion boards together, I have practice quizzes together, I have tests together. Maybe I have in my degree program electives together, my SQ courses together, my SB courses. Literacy is usually one, right? Critical literacy is usually one in a degree. But when you see people dropping out at disproportionate rates, pay attention to that. And that means that your curve, instead of looking like a soft curve, it like it fell out of, like the parachute busted. If the parachute busts, we want to know why, because that's atypical to the standard models that we see. Quiz assignment types. Whenever you're looking at quizzes, and if they are performing poorly, however you define that, let's say not passing. In engineering, if you pass, you like got an A, right? But in organizational leadership or in a humanities, perhaps the quiz performs poorly at 80%. If the preceding work to that, the discussion boards, the assignments, the lectures, the whatever, the activity learning, if they are doing top notch there, if their class average, according to the pivot table, is like 98%, 97%, and then the class average for the quiz is significantly lower, I would say a standard deviation, but we could also say 20% lower. Pick a number that feels qualitatively, subjectively below. And that means that your learning assignments are not supporting the quiz. Same thing happens for the final exam. If your students go through, and I have this experience right now, CS 105, the content mastery, they're doing like 98, 97% as a course average. So that means on average, everybody that tries it gets about a 98%. And there are 4 content mastery assignments per module. And then there's a quiz. Guess how well they do on the quiz? Close to 96%. It's very high. And they get to the final, less than half pass. And the class average is like 48%. So what does that tell us about the assignments? What? They're not supporting the final. Well, then what's the problem? What are some solutions? What are some reasons why they're doing well on the learning activities, but not on the final exam? The learning assignment or the final activity? Final exam? Yeah, they do, right? Okay, so in terms of the course learning objectives, the same thing happens for the program. The program has high level, these degrees, these students need to know these things and have these tasks, these competencies. And if the course work does not align with that, the program work does not align with that, then we need to figure out some realignment. So as it comes to course level data specifically, if you're looking at the course level data and the students are doing well on the assignments and they are performing poorly on the final exam, I always suggest that you look at proctoring. Proctoring is one of the least equitable practices we have in academia, specifically because it heightens anxiety. But for good reason, right? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not trying to like demonize proctoring. What I'm just trying to say is that according to Barbara Johnson's work, anxiety narrows our cognition. The example that I give is I've been riding motorcycles for many years, but I go to get my motorcycle license, and right before you, like a part of the motorcycle license means you have to like go around this curve very gently and you have to stop in the box. And he says, don't use your gas, use your clutch. And I was like, and all of a sudden I didn't know what the difference between a gas and a clutch was because he was looking at me and he was standing right there. And even though I kinesthetically and cognitively knew how to ride a motorcycle, I just panicked and I couldn't do it anymore. And he like looked at me like, I don't know if it's safe to let you ride a motorcycle on the street. So we have this experience of anxiety narrowing our cognition and perhaps erasing. It's kind of like when people watch you type, right? All of a sudden you can't type because somebody's looking over you. Or when in a meeting, when you're only kind of paying attention or you get really scared and then the presenter says, so what problem are you facing in your workplace? And you're like, I don't know. Okay, so sometimes proctoring causes anxiety and it's not necessarily a course alignment issue or a fairness issue. In CIS 105, our specific instance, the final exam questions, the way that I discovered it, when I looked through the quiz statistics, I realized that of the questions that were being asked, the percentage wrong, how often students got it wrong, was over half the time they got it wrong, over half the time, because test banks mean that some students get it, some students don't. Whatever metric your program decides is right or wrong, you can align that, with those objectives. But when the test suggests that the students don't know what they don't know, they might not know what's on the test. And so if you can't draw a backwards map to the question and previous course quizzes or previous course learning activities, then I would suggest that the final exam is ineffective. Or all of the learning activities before are ineffective. So I was telling you that I taught EDU 404. Yeah, so in Mary Lou Fulton, we have a degree, educational studies, and it was born by and large out of people that spent 3.5 years going through our teacher certification program, and then they realized, I really don't want to be a teacher. And instead of dropping out, by and large, we give them another degree that's not certification necessarily, but it's also education related. And you're like, because you have all this coursework and we want to retain and graduate our students. So in EDU 4, we talk about navigating social change, and I would call it an educational advocacy course. And it came about because we realized that teaching as an end goal was not what the students, by and large, in our program, not by and large, there was a significant portion of students in our teaching program that didn't want to be teachers. So when we looked at the data, we decided, it wasn't me, it was my chair, but the chair realized 10 years ago that this is not actually producing the results that we wanted. And in Arizona, I'm sure you guys know the statistic, on average, teachers last as professionals less time than it takes to become a teacher. So 4 to 5 years, it might take you to get your undergraduate degree and your certification. You will teach in Arizona less than 3. So we were like, wait, how do we fix this? Okay, so let's help teachers have a teaching mindset. Let's say you want to be a teacher, but you want to go into corporate and you want to be a learning and design director. You want to teach people in the corporate. So let's say I get a job at ASU because I got this educational studies degree, and I realized I actually really like teaching in webinars. I like teaching other professionals how to do the things that they want to do because they show up to my classroom and they want to know about spreadsheets. But really, that's invigorating for me. But what's not invigorating for me is to have a bunch of punk kids come in here that don't want to be here, and their parents think that I'm the moron because they're failing my class. I don't blame that. Okay. So when we're finding out that people like teaching but not being teachers, that was because we analyzed the data of the course. So you might have a program, a degree program right now, that the data is suggesting that there is a disconnect between the coursework and the course result. Okay. So the last one that I kind of want to go over here is that if we're going to use proxies, if we're going to use midterms and final exams, just because that's a common thing, it's very often that you're going to find midterms and finals in a course, or at least a final exam, whether it's an exam or a project, there will be a end result. Sometimes courses have like a module quiz, and there's 7 of them or 16 of them, and we can kind of look at those. So think of every module as a square in which you can compare to other modules, because you won't have a clean comparison longitudinally, right? Like how long the course has been in effect or how long the program has been in effect and other programs or other courses. So you have to figure out your proxies. You have to figure out what I can compare, even if they have different names or different point values. And I, in general, would suggest that percentages over points are going to be helpful, specifically when we're looking at demographic data. I don't know if this is true in the AU side, but in my ecosystem, I have like, in a random course, I might only have 16 Indigenous students, and I will have 600 white. And so when you compare the percentage of the Indigenous population and the percentage of the white population, it's not particularly fair. This is the last thing that I'm going to say on this. Wait, do we have an hour or we have a half an hour? I was supposed to have a half hour on this one, right? It's because the second session, I was like, oh, let's talk about statistics and how we do statistics on Excel. And I don't know that this is going to be the right thing. Right. Yeah. So they had asked me like, hey, do you want to do like stats in 25 minutes? And I was like, no, that's not fair to anybody, but I'm open to whatever. So if you guys would like to enjoy some like quiet space after this, I won't tell anybody. Maybe you can go to lunch early. I was thinking about lunch right before, but maybe I can answer like final questions, or not even final, they can be beginning questions. I guess I do have to talk about stats for a little bit on this particular point. By and large, we ask ourselves, does the difference matter? Does the difference matter? So I appreciate when we're talking about like courses, let's say that the drop rate goes down or up, but does it matter? And in my world, we call that, is that statistically significant? So we kind of like put ourselves at the altar of the p-value and we go, but is it less than 0.05? We haven't decided, right? You know, like depending on your sample size. And we kind of have a number where we go, yes, it matters, or no, it doesn't. As it relates to p-values, as it relates to statistical significance, just know that in terms of equity, what usually happens is the minoritized, the marginalized population has to demonstrate statistical significance for the rest of the population. Okay, so let's say that we are looking at how much Black women make at ASU versus how much Asian men make at ASU. And if we're comparing those two, that's bad, white men, let's say white men, just because that's fun. I don't know, they get made of, like you guys get demonized all the time, like you chose to be white men, I don't know. But like there's this element of, there's a huge population of white men in ASU. And so let's say that it's 80% that, and there's like 5% Black women. I totally made those numbers up. Don't take that too seriously. My point is that it's now up to the 5% Black women to demonstrate statistically significantly that they make an unfair, less amount of money relative to their different demographic peers. So when we are comparing in statistical analysis, we have to be careful that we are not saying the p-value is too high. There's not a problem. I say this from my own nightmare because I said the same thing. I was like, isn't this great in LE? We don't have a racist system because according to our p-values, our Black students there's no statistically significant difference. And then I got into it a little bit more and then I realized, oh no, of course they can't demonstrate statistical significance because they're a smaller population. Because we're basically saying to them, prove that that large group of white students are not doing that much better. Okay, so in terms of equitable access and equitable data analysis, p-values are super cool. And I really like that we use p-values to demonstrate whether or not something matters. Did this course revision that I make matter? Did gamifying my statistics class matter? Was it worth all of the hours that I spent designing an icon in the leaderboard? Just know that you should be comparing populations that are about the same size. Don't rely on the marginalized population to do the proving of inequity. All right. Okay. So that was all that I really wanted to speak on that specifically. I want to leave it open for other questions that you guys might have. I can even turn it off. We can talk through that. Okay. I'm going to look through and I'm going to figure out a way to get this course profile guide to people so that you can actually see the main point of what I want while I let you check your email or Slack or ask me a question. Or if there's anything from Zoom. I'm assuming you're watching a Zoom chat. Somebody's going to ask me a question. Yeah. A tiny mural. URL. Do you know how to make a tiny URL? I was like, I'm sure I can make a QR code. Oh, this is a course profile. Yeah. So much fun having data people in the same room. You just do the thing and you copy. It is smaller than, oh, do you maybe hit, just out of it, if you get out of it. That's true. Tell me you work on a Mac without telling me you work. And do it up. Oh, you have a tinyurl.com. Okay. Oh, your guys are awesome. Data people for the win. Can we make it into speak reviews? Maybe that'll help you. Find me on LinkedIn so we can be friends. And tell me all of the things because I think that we need each other. Like as I'm gonna be equitable to our friends on Zoom. I look forward to co-suffering with you guys and co-solution finding, because I think that what ends up happening is we feel like, oh, I'm the data person and that's different than the decision maker. But I hope that you will begin to frame yourself and conflate those two, that you are also the decision maker and what you do with the data will influence your ecosystem. And I'm gonna be quiet because I could just sit here and ramble and talk and ask you questions unless you have something, and then I will just wait patiently while you enjoy a minute to your Slack and your emails.